It's weird, I can see myself. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and everyone online as well. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad that we're at a faith institution that wants to celebrate Pride and wants to elevate voices of LGBTQ community. So, thank you. Today I want to talk about this idea of queer kinship and critical hope. What does pride even mean? As we continue to see our dignity and rights being denied, not just in the queer community, but poor folks, immigrants, and BIPOC communities, we must not sink into apathy, but instead remember, as abolitionist Mariame Kaba states, they are relying on our cynicism, our divisions, and our despair, in addition to their mass apparatus of repression, to prevent us from cultivating a new way of living in relation to each other. To defy and defeat them, we must cultivate hope, belonging, care, and action. I believe it is in this interplay of hope, belonging, care, and action that we create our new heaven on earth. But what does that look like in practice? Particularly in a time of compounded grief, where legislative attacks, senseless war, and ecological collapse can so easily overwhelm our nervous systems. How do we, as individuals and as a collective, continue to cultivate this new way of living? I would like to offer a simple framework for each of us to undertake. One that does not simply articulate what it is we in our families and communities dream of, but how to activate those dreams through our collective gifts. So where do we start? We must figure out our why. And for some of us here today, that might look like the 8 principles, but I want to push us further. I want to get even more personal, even more granular. This why is what sustains our spirits in the long and arduous fight against injustice. So it must mean something. This why is for the moments when you see the news of families being torn apart by ICE raids. This why is for when they threaten to strip gender-affirming care from Medicaid, putting thousands at risk of losing life-saving treatment. This why is for the times when it feels like nothing you do matters, and yet you still must act anyway. I invite you to take 5 to 10 minutes one day this week and write down your answer to this question. Why do I keep showing up to do this work? Why do I, you, personally, your name, care about doing the work of collective liberation for all? Here's mine. I keep showing up because I refuse to believe that we cannot create a world full of villagers tending to their village, and where wholeness is possible. I refuse to accept a world that chooses punishment over healing, extraction over care, control over community. I refuse to accept the lie that some people must suffer so that others can feel safe. I refuse to live in a world where we are taught to forget our interconnectedness. However, I do believe in a future where, as the poem says, we restructure our lives, revoking its reaffirmation of profit and power. Amen. Where we root our systems in love, not domination. Where we are brave enough to build relationships stronger than fear and economies that are centered around care. I do this work because I still believe in us. Because I believe that we deserve more than just survival. Because liberation is not just an idea, it is a practice, a commitment. This is what I come back to when I feel like nothing matters. And it is quick to remind me that everything matters, and everyone matters. And yes, while articulating our why is a crucial first step, it is only the beginning. The next is asking, what are my gifts, and how can I use them to serve my community and our collective becoming? And I want to lovingly challenge something here. When many of us feel moved to act, we often think we need to start a nonprofit, launch a program, or find substantial funding first. But you don't need to build a formal structure to do meaningful liberatory work. I've seen some of the most beautiful minds and energy fizzle out underneath institutional gatekeeping and arbitrary backstops. And so the next question that I would love for you to spend some time with this week is, how can I meet a real need right now with what I already have? Think, what am I naturally good at? What resources, skills, or time do I already have access to? And what are people in my community struggling with? And how can I meet those needs? These are not lesser forms of organizing. They are frontline care. They're resistance. And they're the foundation of any real liberation work. So we've defined our why, we've identified our gifts. Now what? Where do we go next? This next part is absolutely crucial because community is everything. Going back to Kaba, they are relying on our division and despair, and I would add isolation to prevent us from creating a new way of living. It can be so easy to isolate, but we must resist that urge. And remember, this is a collective struggle, fought and won by the people and for the people. I believe queer communities and queer kinship has provided a model for this work of liberation. Kinship scholar Marshall Solins says, "Kin are those who participate in each other's existence." Queer kinship is not biological, it is chosen. Our community has long had to create networks of mutual support when blood relatives, governments, and policies have denied our dignity. We have chosen to be active participants in each other's existence, offering the skills and resources we have access to keep each other safe, fed, and housed as best as we are able. I want to say that part again. We have chosen to be active participants in each other's existence, offering the skills and resources we have access to keep each other safe, fed, and housed as best as we are able. This is queer kinship. Take, for example, the Okra Project, founded in January 2018. It began as a grassroots mutual aid initiative to combat food insecurity among Black trans individuals. The intention was to run the New York-based collective, which operated entirely on individual donations until its funds were depleted. However, the donations and worldwide support continued to grow, enabling it to expand both its reach and its offerings. As community needs evolved, they adapted. The Okra Project demonstrates an example of queer kinship not only by its active participation in its community's existence, but also their ability to assess and reassess the needs of that community and adapt in ways that their skills and resources allowed. So to cultivate queer kinship is to cultivate belonging and care, which guides our path towards collective liberation. but it must be met by the interplay of action and hope. So, what does that look like? Well, to have hope is to allow yourself the space in your heart to believe that something is possible. And in allowing yourself to believe that, you are also making yourself susceptible to the pain you will experience if, and quite frankly, when that something doesn't happen. And this is why it is so easy to become hopeless. Because in spite of our earnest hope and belief that there is no way that this injustice could occur, and yet it still did, and our heart broke, and it hardened, and so we stopped giving hope that space in our heart anymore, because we didn't want to deal with the pain, and so we became hopeless. When I first got to divinity school, there was this panel of professors talking about nerdy God stuff, and I got the opportunity to ask a question, and I said, you know, I'm not sure what happened in the past few years or so, but my heart is hard, and I'm just so jaded and cynical. And the professor said to me, hope is a discipline. And that really struck me. In that moment, I was thinking, yes, exactly. It is something that must absolutely be cultivated. And if it isn't, then it will become atrophied. I later found out that was something Kaaba often said, and later found out that Kaaba was told that by a nun. So, you know, it all goes back to God at some point. But I remember thinking in that moment, this is important. This discipline of hope needed to be explored, and it felt like it was different than any hope I had ever participated in before. I have come to understand this hope as a critical hope, which is a hope in action. We must be willing to open our hearts with faith and hope for a world transformed, but also make peace with the fact that it may not be in our lifetime. Blessed are those who plant trees, knowing they may never sit in the shade of their foliage. A critical hope asks that we take stock in that which we are hoping for to ensure that we remain accountable to our communities. Does my hope serve only myself, or does it serve the whole? Are my visions and actions woven into an interconnected web of care, or have I isolated myself? It is not passive. Instead, it comes through us in the form of action, building the future we need with each choice we make. So critical hope is threefold, because it asks us first to offer our hearts fully, even though we know we will experience suffering and disappointment. This vulnerability is the cost of hope. Second, it calls on us to build resilience, to endure pain and loss without shutting down or falling into apathy. Without resilience, the weight of suffering can numb us, and we risk giving up on hope altogether. And third, critical hope demands action. Hope without action becomes empty or passive. To truly live hope means to engage in choices and efforts that help build a better future, even if the full realization may not come in our lifetime. So given all of this, what does pride even mean? Pride is a deep and lasting commitment to a better world, built upon the legacy of our ancestors and carried on by us. The story of pride is constantly being written by the actions we take, not just in June, but in the everyday. Pride is an amalgamation of the beauty we have already created alongside the lament of a world consumed by suffering. This lament, as M. Sean Copeland says, is both a form of prayer and a practice of justice. Without these things, there is no pride. So as we go forth this afternoon, I invite you to explore those two questions. Why do I keep showing up to do this work? And how can I use my gifts to support my community in cultivating this new world? And if you feel yourself getting overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the current hellscape that is Earth and struggling to act, you are not alone. Take a deep breath, ground yourself in God, ground yourself in love, and choose to be an active participant in the collective becoming, one foot after the other. Amen. And we will close. O Holy Creator, we thank you for your presence. Wake now our senses. Wake now our vision of ministry clear. Help us to understand our why and our gifts, and to be together in community and work towards that collective liberation. Amen. Let us now join together for our group benediction.
Look at that clock, man. Nailed it.
I've never been one for...
Well done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I give you a hug?
Yeah, of course.
I'll give that mic back too.
Yeah.
That was really good.
Good. I'm glad you liked it. Yeah.
Yeehaw.
Woo!
Woohoo, you did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got it one well.
You got another hug coming.
Thank you. I'll take it. Good. I'm glad you liked it. Yeah. I appreciate that.